Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jared Bowl. I'm the Student Resource Data Manager for the AIM unit at the OPI. And today's webinar is for the Fall Assessment Collection. We're going to cover the Fall Assessment Registration Collection User Guide, and then take a look at the State Assessment Test Settings User Guide, which is new. To locate those user guides, you're going to navigate to the OPI AIM homepage, which is at this web address. And you're going to scroll down to the User Guides tab. Go to User Guides by Collection Schedule and scroll down until you come to the Assessment Registration. It says Fall and Spring. And the same user guides are used for both the fall and the spring. Click on the assessment registration link and then the state assessment test settings link, and that will bring you to those two user guides we're looking at. This webinar is being recorded so that it can be posted to the AIM webinars page here for later viewing. It will be located under the 2020-21-22 recorded webinars tab at the top here, along with the other webinars we've done so far for this year. As I mentioned, I'm going to be discussing the state assessment test settings module and user guide, and we did a recording for that previously in this year to discuss that new module, but I will cover it again in this webinar. And on the left here, you'll see the complete webinar schedule for the rest of the year. You can see here the Fall EL Assessment Verification webinar, which is taking place today. And then on the next district webinar is on September 9th, and that's going to be for previous year grads, cohorts, dropouts, validation, certification process. If you don't have access, or if you need access to these Zoom links for these webinars, they can be found in the bulletins, which are also trace historied here in this previously sent collection of emails. All right, feel free to ask questions, interrupt me. If you use the chat feature, just know that I don't always catch it right away because I'm busy. I'm rattling off things and looking at my user guides up here. So feel free to interrupt me at any moment. It does not hurt my feelings at all. All right, so jumping into the assessment registration collection, the OPI uses data from AIM Infinite Campus to identify and register students for statewide assessments. The AIM Assessment Registration Collection identifies students who are required to take the Montcast suite of the required statewide assessments. This user guide is it essentially breaks down ensuring that your enrollments are accurate and up to date. That's primary information inside of this user guide. We have a table of contents, including the AIM data checklist, which I'll go over here in a second. And then some frequently asked questions. Which students must be enrolled? District should ensure that all enrollments for all students are properly updated throughout the school year. So if someone leaves, update Infinite Campus, your system, when that happens. This includes the entry of new students and exiting of students who have left the district. Should I update grade levels at semester? Districts that award high school students as credit at the end of the first semester should make sure the correct grade levels are recorded on the enrollment record inside of Infinite Campus. I'll go over that in a little bit here. How do I verify the data I've entered into AIM Infinite Campus is accurate? There are various reports and ad hocs that you can run throughout the year to verify your data. And then how do I enter supports or accommodation test settings for a student? We have the brand new module for that inside of Infinite Campus and a user guide dedicated to that purpose, which is here, and I'll go over that towards the end of the webinar. So looking at our data checklist, you want to make sure that your students have accurate enrollment information and that there are no overlapping enrollments. To do that, you can run reports inside Infinite Campus under Index Student Information Reports, and then there are various reports there to help you look at that data. There's duplicate IDs, enrollment status, enrollment summary, and then there's also the state enrollment verification and state enrollment overlap report. Those reports are located under index, student information, and under reports. And various reports here, like enrollment summary detail, for example, allows you to customize the report to have certain data elements appear. You can customize it to be as of a certain date. You can select one school or all of your schools. You can select service types you want to look at. And you can select start statuses you may want to look at, either all of them. You can look at continuing education or first time enrolled. You can look at just transfer students if you wish. Then moving on to the next screen, click next. You can check here which data elements you wish to appear in the report, such as name, gender, state ID number, race, ethnicity, etc. And then you can choose your format to which you'd like to export it. If you want to manipulate the data, you can export it to CSV, which is an Excel file, or you can do a PDF and click Generate Report here. The other reports operate in a very similar fashion. So next, you want to make sure that your end dates and end statuses for withdrawn students are up to date. So if you've had any kids not return over the summer, and you've got them enrolled for this year, you want to make sure that that enrollment is updated, either deleted, or if it's a dropout, put a one-day enrollment in there and put a dropout reason. That was covered under the beginning of year verification webinar last week. Enter any special education exit date and exit reasons for exited special ed students. Verify that all completed special ed ERs and IEPs are locked. Verify the status of Montana Youth Challenge, Job Corps, Montana Digital Academy students, and end date any enrollments as necessary. Populate the sort by field if applicable, not required. Modify enrollments to reflect semester grade level changes. We'll cover that here in a minute. Verify those students who take alternate tests are marked in the IEP under statewide assessments. Request EL records transfers upon enrollment. Please do not wait to request records. You can see our EL tool guide for more on processing records requests, as well as creating an EL flag for students. The collection timeline. So the assessment collection, there's various markers, mile markers throughout the year, you could say. There's fall, EL, winter registration, ACT with writing, and spring registration. Right now, today, we're just looking at fall EL verification. The open date for this collection is 8/11, August 11th, and this closes on October 15th. What you want to do is verify that all of your English learners have an EL flag for October WIDA materials ordering upload. Please submit records requests for EL students ASAP. And then you will want to enter and verify student supports and accommodation test settings for any special population 504 EL students. That would be on this user guide here. So again, this is covering the general enrollment information to ensure that you have accurate end dates, end statuses, start statuses for your enrollments. Here are some notes about start statuses that may be applicable to your situations. If a student was previously enrolled in a homeschool and is transferred into your district, you would want the start status code 09, transferred from a homeschool. If a student was previously enrolled in a private school in another state, you use the start status code 06, transferred from out-of-state school. Only use start status 01, first time receiving education services, if the student was never enrolled in any type of school previously. This is likely going to be a PK student or a kindergarten student. And then kindergarten students are 01 code if they were never enrolled in a PK program. Service types also should accurately reflect the type of service the student is receiving at the district. So there's three types. There's a primary service type, there's the partial service type, and then the end special ed service type. Primary service type is for the student who has a primary enrollment in your district. It should be noted that students cannot have two primary enrollments simultaneously. A student can be served in the middle school, for example, if they're enrolled in 8th grade primarily, they would have a service type of primary. However, they could also have a high school enrollment if they're taking, say, a math course at the high school, in which case they would have a partial enrollment, S service type, for that high school enrollment. And then N service type would be if they're only receiving special ed services. So this is the section about mid-year grade level changes I was speaking of earlier. If it's the school's district policy to change student grade levels at semester based on the number of credits, make those changes inside Infinite Campus to ensure the students are properly coded for statewide summative testing within any of the Montana Comprehensive Assessment System MONCAS tests. So under the enrollment tab, and the student's current enrollment as of the last day of the first semester, using the NStatus 105 code, change in grade level during regular school year. Then create a new enrollment for a new grade level as of the first day of the second semester using Start Status 02, continued enrollment in the same school. And then any Montana Addition districts can use the file upload method for any grade level changes if you've got multiple. I would recommend doing them just one at a time if you've got a handful. But if you've got 50 or 100, then you can use the file upload method to process those. So inside Infinite Campus, I'm going to pull up a student here. And let's say that this student was advanced to the next grade level mid-year, so after the first semester. So then you would want to have this enrollment, excuse me, end dated for that first semester and then promoted to another grade level. Scroll down here. Can't see it. Can't see it there. My eyes are squinting. It would be code 105, change in grade level. There it is. Code, change in grade level. It's the second one down. Change in grade level during regular school year. That'd be the end status for that student. Then it would be that enrollment would be ended essentially. Then you'd click save and then click on new, the blue button. Do not use the new enrollment history button. It's the blue button. And you'd create a brand new enrollment with a grade level advance. So this kiddo would be 6th grade instead, and then start date of the second semester with that code 02 start status, continued education. And then on the same enrollment tab, there's the sort by field underneath all of the program participation boxes, which can be used. It's optional. It's part of the student's enrollment record. And sort by field is an additional identifier used for sorting test booklet or test ticket labels. The sort by field can contain a teacher name, a team name, a room number, or any other sort option desired. Labels will be sorted by district first, then the school, then the grade, then any sort by field information. And I'll point that out to here on the enrollment tab. Scroll down to the state reporting fields. Past the program participation, and it's at the very bottom here. So the first step in data verification, process is to make sure the data is correct at the district level. This may involve dialogue with specific staff, especially if you've got your SPED staff entering data. Maybe your secretary does just certain programs, or however the duties are divided up. You may have to have conversations regarding if the data is completed, if it's accurate. And then once they tell you that the data is ready to go, then you can check using these student information reports that I pointed out at the beginning. to look at the accuracy of that data. Those are handy because you get a bird's eye view. You can print it out of all of your student enrollments, for example, on paper if you need it, or an Excel sheet. So you don't have to go through Infinite Campus and look at each student enrollment one by one. You can get a quick glance view if you use that enrollment summary details report, for example. Ad hoc reporting also exists for this purpose to check, verify your data, and that's underneath of the index under ad hoc reporting. Let me close this up. And there'll be a state published folder under filter designer. State published folder is there. You can expand it, and then you'll see a litany of ad hocs that are designed for you to check your enrollments. And then once you're done, you can do a resync once you're sure that the data is set to go under the index, system administration, data utilities. Check the enrollment box and the graduation boxes, and then all other relative fields will populate, and then click send resync. So under index, system administration, data utilities, resync state data, you'll get this gray box like this. If you notice that zone warning came up, it's because I was in a year that is no longer syncing to the state. So campus has active scope years. It's previous, current, and future. If any of your scope years, of any of your years that you're in working are beyond the scope years, it won't sync to the state because we don't need that data anymore coming up to the state every night. So that's what that little message is about. So click on whatever year you're working in, and then click on the enrollment button here. All their boxes will populate, and then click on the graduation button. And send resync is underneath of my Zoom bar here. And it'll send it up to the state. So for having tidy enrollment data, that's what this essentially is talking about. Now, with regards to fall EL verification and verifying that English learners have an active EL flag, you'd want to go into Campus, search any EL students. You can run an ad hoc if you've got many. Run an ad hoc to get a list of all your EL students if you want to do it that way. Or you can do an ad hoc filter designer and click on search for the EL all year ad hoc, and your name should populate here. So let's pretend that these are the EL students for this year. So I can click on their name, and then I can go over to index, student information, program participation, English learners. And then I can populate this EL module for that student if it is not already. If the student, perhaps, I spoke to a school the other day and they said that they need to get tidied up on their EL records because they haven't had someone looking at them in a bit. And so they wanted to know how to end those certain EL records when the student was no longer. So I navigated them to the EL program participation module and showed them around in here. So if this student had an active one, they would have, and they're no longer considered EL or participating, they would have exited, and they would enter the program exit date, etc. There's the identified date here, and click save. So this is prompting you to make sure that your active English learners have that active flag there and that everything is looking correct for those EL students. So if you run the ad hoc and you see someone in there like, oh, this student is no longer part of EL, then you know that their program flag probably needs to be exited. So more about that under the English Learners tool, which is linked into this guide. So let's go ahead and click there. And in here, you'll find a table of contents and a summary of what this guide does for you. But essentially, it walks you through step by step in detail how to use that EL tool module. Under the index, it's going to prompt you to let you know that your home primary language and language impact are required in order to use that module. So those are found under the demographic tab. So if those two fields are not populated for your EL students, it won't function. So let's go back to a demographic record. Get to the demographic page for any student. You go to index census people, and it takes you to the demographics tab. In here, you'll scroll down, you'll find the home primary language and language impact fields, which both of them need to be populated. And then in here, the EL tab talks a little bit more about, you can enter comments. It tells you here the statuses only use EL and EL exited program statuses. Do not use pending or not EL, even though they're an option, do not use those. You could also re-enter. Once a student has been exited from EL, this re-enter button, which I'll zoom in here, will appear. So that'll appear once the EL tab has been exited. If a student is later re-identified as EL, click that that re-enter button, and then a dialog box will open up to re-enter the student's EL status information, like so. And then there's other portions of that tool, such as the EL services option, EL accommodations, and then the all-important records transfers for EL. So if you've got a student transferring in and you enroll them, this records transfer process should be automatic. It should occur in that enrollment process if you are enrolling them correctly. If they're transferring in from a different district, you're going to use the student locator tool, and you'll do a search, and you should find their name in the system already with a state ID already tied to them. Click on that name, populate the enrollment data, click save, and it's going to automatically pop up with this record transfer window. All you need to do is hit submit request. You don't even have to fill out anything in there. It's going to prompt a request to the previous district. The previous district will hopefully release the record. If not, call them. And then you will see from the release, all those blue hyperlinked items indicate that there's a record tied to that enrollment or that demographic for that student. And it's available. If there's a line through it, it's not available. And you can see that the student has an EL record. Then you can click on it and it will import those records for you. And again, searching for EL students, as I mentioned, you can use the ad hoc state published folder and search all PR EL. So that's all year programs EL students. You can click test to see a PDF report, or click search inside the ad hoc to get results in the outline. So get your students to appear here. So if I zoom in here, it's talking about these two buttons here, search and test. Test will create a PDF. Search will bring you into the search results inside Canvas. If you need help with this tool, I'm happy to help you out. Just give me a jingle, or you can submit a help desk ticket. I'll help you out there. So state assessment and test settings. This is the new module inside Infinite Campus, and this user guide is to help you with this new module. It's relatively straightforward. We'll go through this. As I mentioned, we did a full webinar on this specific module, but I'll cover it today just because it's tied so closely to the assessment webinar itself. So the State Assessment Test Settings tab allows districts to track state assessment test settings for EL supports and Section 504 accommodations. A student must be an active participant in EL or Section 504 in order to utilize this tool. If a student has an IEP, the state assessment test settings must be documented in their IEP. Students can be an active participant in both EL and Section 504. So in order for them to be considered active, EL students not only need that a flag created, but on their enrollment tab, go to the current year, enrollment for the student, we'd have to make sure that if it's a 504 student, this box here in program participation needs to be checked. And then click save. If it's a gifted, EL student has to have that flag created. Excuse me, I was getting confused there for a second. In order for this state assessment test settings module to occur. So if those are not done yet, create those indicators here by clicking on the section 504 for that student if they are a participant, and making sure that the student has an EL flag created under the module. Then go to student information and then general. And then here you'll see the state assessment test settings module. And you can click new. And here it's going to give you a warning that says student must be active participant in those programs to document the state assessments test settings. So you can check if the student is EL or 504 or both. It allows you to do both. Indicate the current grade. And then going into this further, this is a direct entry method for this. All districts use this method. Current grade, and then here's a note on start date. So this date must fall within the active EL or 504 record. The date also corresponds to the date that the student was approved to receive their test settings. The end date will automatically populate with a date that is at 1 full year from the entered start date. The end date is also the expiration date for the approved test setting. And then from there, you select the state assessment from the menu. So you enter the start date, which is the date of the approval for the test setting or accommodation. And then this will populate 1 year out from there. And then here the state assessment options are below. You can check whatever, click whichever ones are applicable for the student. And you see these gray boxes below remain, they're not editable until one of these is opted. And then whichever one is opted allows you to edit inside that box. You can pick whatever accommodations or settings are applicable. Example, and you can choose multiple. And you would click save. It's not going to let me save it because the student does not have that 504 box checked on their enrollment tab. But just showing you how that works. And then you can also enter notes here for test setting those. So this is step-by-step instructions for entering those test settings accommodations for students. And just note that if that checkbox again isn't checked at the enrollment tab, you'll get a validation warning and we'll let you save it. Here's some additional resources for this if you need it, including an Excel spreadsheet detailing test set settings and accommodations in greater detail beyond what's here. So if you have questions, you can look that over. And then there's some frequently asked questions, such as how often do I review students as EL and 504 accessibility support plans? EL and 504 accessibility support plans should be reviewed on an annual basis. For ELs, the OPI recommends a review of the EL supports when the EL team meets at the school district level to review. A recommended time to review accommodations and supports is in the spring, when access for ELL's results reports are delivered. As I mentioned, the state assessment test setting record can be created if a student is both EL and 504. Where can I check to see if a student has an active 504 record? So I pointed that out under the state reporting field under the enrollment tab. That 504, section 504 box needs to be checked. If it's not checked, that 504 record is not active. And then you can also check for those EL students, make sure that they have an EL record under that EL learners tool. Okay, that essentially covers I'm going to go to the collection schedule for this year. We have now covered the fall assessment verification collection. We're looking at this information here, and you can see the corresponding user guides, which I've covered today, linked into the side here. Last week, we went over the beginning of the year verification information and documents along with that. And we also last week went over the student photo repository. And we've also discussed enrollments, EL identification so far. And as I mentioned, coming up here in September 9th, I believe, is the next webinar for previous year graduate cohort dropout validation and certification. So be sure to follow along on that collection schedule. Are there any questions before we close out? Again, this webinar will be located under the 21-22 recorded webinars at the top here. They just get piled on on top of each other here. There's beginning of the year verification I mentioned and student photo repository. And then the state assessment test settings webinar that we recorded earlier in the year. All right, well, if you have questions after watching this webinar, if you're stuck on something, just feel free to reach out. I'm happy to help you. If I can't help you, I'll try and find someone who can. And my contact information is right there. All right, thanks very much.